I was sitting near the back of the diner, nursing a black coffee and watching the rain smear the windows. It was the kind of place that hadn't changed since the 60s, worn vinyl booths, a jukebox nobody touched, and a waitress named Diane who always called everyone "Hon." That morning, an older man walked in. Late 60s, maybe older. Dressed sharp in a gray wool coat, cane tapping gently with every step. He nodded at Diane, smiled softly, and made his way to a stool at the counter. "Good morning, sir," she said. "Same as usual." He gave her a polite smile. "Yes, ma'am. Just coffee and quiet." The man didn't seem to bother anyone. He just sipped his drink, reading something in a leather-bound notebook. I didn't pay him much mind, until the door opened again. 2 local patrol officers stepped in, drenched in ego more than rain. They walked straight up to the old man without a word. "You've been sitting here a while," one of them said, tall and tight-jawed. "ID." The older man looked up slowly. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." The officer pointed a finger at the man's chest. "You've been loitering. Let's see some ID." "I'm a paying customer," the old man said calmly, placing a $5 bill on the counter. "And I haven't caused any trouble." The taller cop leaned in, face close. "You trying to be a smartass?" Before anyone could react, it happened. A loud smack. The officer struck the old man across the cheek, knocking his glasses to the floor. The diner went silent. Even Diane froze. I stood up from my booth, heart pounding. I wasn't the only one. People were pulling out phones, but no one said a word. Then, the bell above the door chimed again. A tall man in a black windbreaker stepped inside, scanning the room with steel eyes. He was calm. Focused. Dangerous. He saw the old man. Saw the cop. And then he said, very softly, "Dad, what happened?" The moment that word, "Dad," left the younger man's mouth, the energy in the diner changed. The cop who'd done the hitting took a step back, hand twitching near his belt like he was reaching for something but didn't know what. The old man, still holding his cheek, blinked in surprise. "Son. I didn't know you were coming today." The younger man walked forward slowly, eyes never leaving the 2 officers. "Neither did I. I was heading to Quantico. Got a call from Diane." He nodded at the waitress, who looked visibly shaken but gave a small nod back. The shorter cop muttered, "Wait, Quantico." His partner elbowed him, but it was too late. The man reached into his jacket, calmly, clearly, no sudden movements, and pulled out a leather badge case. He flipped it open, showing an unmistakable gold shield and ID. "FBI. Special Agent Carter. I'm going to ask you both to step back. Right now." His voice was sharp, authoritative. Not angry. Controlled. The kind of voice that didn't beg, it commanded. The taller cop scoffed. "You can't just waltz in here and, you laid hands on a civilian without provocation," Agent Carter cut him off. "On a senior citizen. In public. In front of witnesses. That's assault under color of authority. And you did it in front of federal eyes." Silence. The whole diner was listening now. Some people had their phones out. One woman was live-streaming quietly from the corner. The old man tried to rise, and his son was instantly at his side, helping him to his feet. "I told you to stop coming to this town alone," Agent Carter said softly. "These guys don't know who they're messing with." The old man shook his head gently. "I didn't want to cause trouble." "You didn't." Agent Carter turned back to the cops. "They did." The 2 officers exchanged glances. Nervous now. Sweating. That's when Agent Carter reached into his pocket again, and pulled out a small recording device. He clicked it. "It's all on tape. Every word. Every action." And then he looked the tall officer in the eye. "Are you ready to answer for what you did?" The tall officer's jaw clenched. His partner shifted awkwardly behind him, the color draining from his face. They weren't used to being challenged, certainly not by someone with a badge that outranked theirs by miles. "Look," the taller one finally said, trying to regain control, "we didn't know who he was. Thought he might be suspicious." Agent Carter interrupted. "Because he was drinking coffee? Reading? Wearing a coat?" The younger officer stammered, "He didn't comply. We asked for ID, he didn't need to." "You had no legal grounds," Carter shot back. "And instead of asking Diane, the manager of this place, who could have told you he's been coming here for years, you went straight to intimidation. Then you put hands on him." Diane stepped forward hesitantly, holding a napkin and a bag of ice. "Agent Carter, he comes in every Thursday morning. Same seat. Same order. Never a problem." Agent Carter nodded to her, then gently helped his father sit back down and pressed the ice against his cheek. The tall officer puffed his chest. "You don't understand how this works." "No," Carter said. "You don't." He took a slow step toward the pair of them. Not aggressive. Not threatening. But with the kind of confidence that made the air thick. "I've spent the last 12 years investigating public corruption, civil rights violations, and law enforcement abuse of power. You know what the worst ones have in common? They start just like this. With guys like you thinking you can do anything because you've got a badge and a belt." The tall officer opened his mouth but said nothing. "Here's what's going to happen," Carter said, voice steady. "You're both going to turn around, walk out of here, and wait for a formal investigation to begin. If you interfere, if you try to alter reports, delete body cam footage or intimidate anyone in this diner, I will personally file obstruction charges and see to it that your careers end in handcuffs." Both officers went pale. The short one whispered, We should go." The taller one hesitated, but then, without another word, turned on his heel and walked out the door. His partner followed close behind, eyes on the ground. As the door slammed shut behind them, the diner let out a collective breath no one realized they were holding. Agent Carter sat across from his father, who watched him with tired, proud eyes. "You always did like to make an entrance," the old man said. Carter gave a small smile. "You raised me that way." The diner slowly came back to life. Silverware clinked. Quiet murmurs filled the air. But the atmosphere was still heavy, no one could quite believe what they'd just witnessed. Diane brought over a fresh cup of coffee for the older man, her hands trembling slightly as she set it down. "For what it's worth, Mr. Carter. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Again." The old man nodded appreciatively. "You've always been kind, Diane. Don't blame yourself." Agent Carter pulled out a small notebook from his jacket, the kind field agents used. He began jotting notes while glancing up occasionally. "We'll need witness statements. Body cam footage. Security cam from this place." "I can email it to you," Diane offered quickly. "We have 3 cameras running 24/7, front door, counter, and register. They'll show everything." "Perfect," Carter replied. "That footage will be under federal protection now. Don't let anyone from the department touch it before I get a copy. Not even a supervisor." A man at the next booth leaned over. "I saw everything, too. You need a statement. I'll give one. So will they." He motioned around the diner, where people were nodding. "I'd appreciate that," Carter said, looking up. "This isn't just about today. This is about making sure it doesn't happen again." The old man finally spoke again, voice quieter. "You know, I used to wear a badge too. 40 years in the field. Gave everything to the job. But these days, it's like they don't see that anymore. They just see someone to hassle." Carter didn't answer right away. He looked at his father, saw the deep crease in his brow, the disappointment under his calm exterior. Then he spoke, firmly but gently. "That ends now." The bell over the door rang again. This time it wasn't a cop, it was a man in a suit. Gray blazer, dark tie, earpiece tucked behind one ear. He walked straight to Carter, flashed a DHS badge, and leaned in. "We got your alert. Just spoke to Internal Affairs. They're requesting your footage and full statement. You want us to take lead?" Carter shook his head. "No. I've got this one." He stood, slid the recording device and notebook into his pocket, and looked around the room. "Let them know. We're not letting this slide." By now, the diner had transformed from a quiet neighborhood haunt into the front row of a reckoning. A few more people had entered, drawn in by the buzz or the live stream still quietly running in the corner. But nobody interrupted. They just listened. Agent Carter took one last sip of his father's coffee before speaking to the DHS agent still standing beside him. "Tell Internal Affairs they'll have everything in an hour. I'm heading straight to the precinct after this." He paused, then added, "And tell them to keep the chain of custody clean. I want no interference, no accidental deletions, and no desk officer running cover." The DHS agent gave a crisp nod and stepped outside to make the call. The older Mr. Carter shifted in his seat. "Are you sure about all this?" he asked his son. Carter met his father's eyes. "You taught me that a badge means responsibility, not entitlement." He looked back at the gathered crowd. "I don't care what patch someone wears. If they use it to hurt, not help, they answer for it." The door opened again. This time, it was different. A young officer entered cautiously, clearly sent by someone higher up. He scanned the room, saw Agent Carter, and approached him slowly with a tight, forced smile. "Agent Carter. I'm Officer Medina. Sergeant Halston sent me to check on the situation. Said there might have been a misunderstanding." Carter straightened. "There was no misunderstanding. One of your officers assaulted a civilian, my father, in a public place. With zero legal justification. In front of witnesses. I have the footage and audio. And I'm filing federal charges." Officer Medina blinked. "Understood. Sergeant Halston also asked if you'd be willing to." "No," Carter cut him off. "There's no deal. No quiet walk back. No sweep under the rug." He stepped closer. "You tell your sergeant that accountability's not optional anymore. He wants to talk. He can do it in a hearing." Medina gave a quick nod, clearly overwhelmed, and turned to leave. The old man let out a slow breath. "You really meant it when you said things were gonna change." Carter placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "They have to. And it starts here." Outside the diner window, people had begun gathering, some reporters, some locals, some just curious. But none of them knew the whole story yet. They would soon. An hour later, the sun had pushed through the rain clouds, casting a strange calm over the town as Agent Carter drove toward the precinct. His father rode silently beside him, still cradling the bag of ice against his cheek. Despite the ache, there was a quiet strength in his eyes, a silent approval. As they pulled into the police station lot, Carter spotted both patrol cruisers from earlier already parked out front. A cluster of officers milled around the steps. A few recognized him and quickly looked away. Inside, the atmosphere was stiff. Tense. The front desk clerk straightened up as soon as he saw the badge. "Special Agent Carter. Internal Affairs is in the conference room. Sergeant Halston's waiting inside." Carter nodded. "Good. Let's not keep them waiting." He escorted his father to a seat near the entrance. "You all right here for a few minutes?" "I'm fine," his father said. "Do what you need to do." Carter walked down the hallway, each step echoing. When he opened the door to the conference room, 3 people turned, 2 internal affairs reps, and Sergeant Halston, a man with the permanent scowl of someone used to brushing things under rugs. "Agent Carter," Halston said dryly, barely masking his irritation. "We've reviewed the footage. Certainly looks bad. But I'm sure there's an explanation." Carter placed a thumb drive on the table and folded his arms. "There's no explanation that justifies what happened. Your officer committed an unprovoked physical assault on a civilian. On camera. Surrounded by witnesses." He turned to the IA officers. "The victim is a retired law enforcement veteran. I have his personnel records if needed." The patrolman never asked questions. Never assessed the scene. They acted on impulse, and they crossed the line. One IA rep, a woman named Kersey, leaned forward. "You're filing formal charges?" "Yes," Carter replied. "Federal civil rights violation. Assault under color of law. Abuse of authority." Halston scoffed. "That's overkill." "No," Carter said, locking eyes with him. "What he did to my father. That was overkill." The room fell silent. Then Agent Carter slid a folder across the table. "Everything you need is in here. Video, audio, and 6 sworn statements. More coming in. I suggest you begin the suspension process immediately." Sergeant Halston didn't move. But Kersey opened the folder and began scanning it. After a moment, she looked up. "We'll take it from here." Carter turned and headed for the door. But just before he stepped out, he looked back. "If your officers don't remember who they're supposed to serve, I'll remind them." Then he left. As Agent Carter stepped back into the station lobby, he immediately noticed the shift. Whispers. A few officers stood near the coffee machine, murmuring to each other and avoiding eye contact. Others peeked over cubicle dividers like school kids watching a principal walk past. The tension wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. Carter didn't flinch. He walked straight to the bench where his father waited. "Everything set?" the old man asked. Carter nodded. "IA is taking over." Halston wasn't thrilled, but he's smart enough to stay out of the way. For now. Just then, a younger officer, barely out of academy age, approached cautiously. "Sir." "Agent Carter," he said, voice low. "I just wanted to say. I saw the footage. What happened back there? That wasn't right." Carter looked him over. Honest eyes. Nervous, but sincere. "Then speak up," Carter said plainly. The young man hesitated. "You think it'll matter? If people like you stay quiet?" Carter said. "Then no, it won't. But if you step up when it counts. That's how it starts." The officer gave a small nod, glanced over his shoulder, and walked away without another word. But Carter could tell, something had landed. Back outside, as they walked toward the car, his father finally spoke again. "You're risking a lot, you know. Reputation. Relationships. There are some folks in there who won't forget today." "I'm not worried about being remembered," Carter said. "I'm worried about what happens if I let it slide." The older man let out a slow, approving breath. "Your mother would be proud." Just as Carter opened the driver's door, his phone buzzed. He glanced down, a text from Director Keene at the FBI field office. "Got the footage. Reviewed it myself. We're opening a formal inquiry. Full support. Keep pushing." Carter showed the message to his father, who nodded, then settled into the seat beside him. As they pulled out of the lot, the older man turned to the window, gazing at the town slowly fading behind them. "Maybe," he said, "today was the start of something better." Carter tightened his grip on the wheel. "No," he replied. "It was the start of something overdue." News of the incident spread faster than anyone expected. By the next morning, clips from the diner had made their way to national media. The headline wasn't just "Officer assaults elderly man," it was "FBI agent confronts abuse in his hometown," and it was his own father. Local news vans parked outside the diner. Diane, the waitress, had to put up a handwritten sign that read, "No interviews, we're still just serving coffee." Inside police headquarters, things weren't business as usual anymore. Internal Affairs had locked down the bodycam servers. Officer Thorne, the one who'd struck Mr. Carter, had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. His partner, shaken and suddenly cooperative, had turned over his report and admitted the truth. Meanwhile, Agent Carter wasn't slowing down. He was back at the field office in D.C., meeting with senior leadership. The case was now listed under the Civil Rights Division, with oversight from DOJ legal teams. His inbox was flooded, some messages angry, others grateful. A few from retired law enforcement officers who said they'd seen too many moments like that go ignored. One email stood out. It was from a deputy chief in another small town. "What you did took guts. Most would have kept their head down. You've reminded a lot of us why we took the oath in the first place. Thank you." Carter forwarded it to his father without a word. The reply came just a few minutes later: "You've already done more than I ever expected. But I'm proudest not of your badge, but of your backbone." Back in town, things were shifting too. The city council called for an emergency oversight meeting. Community leaders spoke out, firmly, calmly, not with anger, but clarity. Not about politics, but about standards. About decency. The ripple had begun. And while it was just the beginning, people were finally paying attention. 2 weeks later, the city held a public oversight hearing at Town Hall. Word spread quickly, and by evening, the chamber was packed, standing room only. Reporters lined the back walls, cameras rolling. Locals, young and old, filled every seat. At the center of it all sat a long panel: city officials, civilian review board members, and the interim police commissioner, who had been appointed after internal pressure forced Sergeant Halston into early retirement. Agent Carter entered through the side door, crisp in his suit. His father walked beside him, no cane this time. Just quiet strength. Carter approached the podium when his name was called. "I'm here," he began, "not just as a federal agent, or the son of a retired officer. I'm here as a man who watched someone I love get hurt, by a uniform that should have protected him." The room was silent. The issue here isn't just about one officer's actions. It's about what allowed that officer to think he could act with impunity. It's about a system that's grown too comfortable dismissing accountability as paperwork. Carter looked toward the back of the room where several young officers sat, notebooks in hand. Good officers don't fear transparency. They welcome it. Because it protects them too. From the rot that hides behind the badge. There were quiet nods around the room. He continued, "This town deserves better. And you, on this panel, have the power to start that change. Mandatory bodycam audits. Civilian complaint review. Independent oversight that doesn't answer to the same people being investigated." He paused. "Let it breathe. Make the badge mean something again. Not fear. Not unchecked power. But trust." A few seconds passed after he finished. Then applause broke out, soft at first, then louder. Even some officers joined in. As Carter stepped down, his father met him at the bottom of the steps. "You said what needed saying," the old man murmured. "I said what they needed to hear," Carter replied. But deep down, he knew, it wasn't just for them. It was for every father who had ever been overlooked. And every son who refused to let it go unnoticed. 2 months passed. Officer Thorne was officially removed from the force. Not quietly. Not with some sealed internal memo. But publicly, after the department upheld the misconduct findings and released a statement acknowledging wrongdoing. For once, the silence broke. And the silence mattered. More importantly, policies changed. The town council voted unanimously to adopt an independent civilian oversight board. All patrol officers were now required to undergo quarterly de-escalation and civil rights training, real training, not checkbox seminars. The diner? Back to its usual rhythm. Mr. Carter returned to his seat at the counter, just like he always had. Same gray wool coat. Same soft smile. Only now, when he walked in, people didn't look through him. They nodded. They shook his hand. They saw him. Diane brought him his usual. Coffee and quiet, she asked. He chuckled. Maybe just coffee. Quiet's been overrated lately. Outside, a black government SUV idled. Agent Carter leaned against it, arms crossed, watching through the glass. He wasn't there to protect anymore. He was just visiting. Checking in. His father eventually stood and made his way to the door. Carter opened it for him without a word. They walked together toward the vehicle. You know, the older man said, for all that trouble, you could have just left it alone. Carter glanced at him. Yeah. I could have. He opened the passenger door for his father. But then I wouldn't be your son. The elder Carter smiled, eyes misty but proud. And that's the badge I care about. As the SUV pulled away, the diner faded in the rearview mirror. But something stayed behind, bigger than headlines or hearings. A message. That when truth walks into the room, quiet, steady, undeniable, it changes things. Maybe not all at once. But enough. Enough to remind people what justice is supposed to look like. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at Agent Carter's D.C. office. Not an email. Not a memo. An actual handwritten letter. It was from a young officer in the same precinct where it all began. Agent Carter, I just wanted to say thank you. Watching how you stood up, for your father, for what's right, changed the way I see this job. It's easy to get numb to things. Easy to forget who we serve. But I won't anymore. I joined to protect. Now I remember why. Officer J. Medina. Carter folded the letter and slid it into the small drawer where he kept a few personal items, an old photo of his academy class, a silver coin his father once gave him, and now this. That night, he visited his father again. They didn't speak about the case. They sat on the porch, watching the sun set beyond the trees. After a long silence, his father spoke up. You think it'll last? All this change? Carter didn't answer right away. He listened to the wind rustling through the leaves, the distant hum of life continuing. Then he said, it'll last, if we make it last. The old man gave a small nod. That's what we do, then. They sat quietly after that. No cameras. No statements. No courtroom drama. Just two men, father and son, bound by the kind of justice that doesn't come from a title or a gun or a badge. But from choosing to stand, when it would have been easier to sit. A month later, Agent Carter stood in front of a new graduating class at the FBI Academy in Quantico. He hadn't planned to speak. But after everything, what happened at the diner, the fallout, the policy changes, Director Keene personally asked him to address the recruits. He stood on the stage, no notes in hand, eyes calm. When I was your age, he began, I thought this job was about being the smartest one in the room. The best shot. The fastest thinker. But that's not what makes an agent. He paused. What makes an agent, is knowing when to stand still. When to say no. And when to say enough. A few heads nodded. The room was silent. About 2 months ago, I walked into a diner and saw someone I love get hurt by the very system he once served. And I had a choice, to walk away like it didn't happen, or to walk through the fire and face what most people pretend not to see. He looked out over the crowd. If you're wearing a badge just to feel powerful, take it off now. But if you're here to protect, not just the easy calls, but the hard truths, then welcome. We need you. A beat of silence. Then thunderous applause. Later that night, as Carter left the academy grounds, he found a quiet message waiting on his phone. A voicemail, from his father. I listened to the speech. Not bad for a rookie agent. And for what it's worth, your grandfather would have been proud, too. You carried more than a badge that day. You carried our name. Carter stood alone in the parking lot, phone still in hand, watching the stars overhead. And right there, without cameras, without a crowd, he made a promise, to keep standing. To keep watching. To keep the badge honest. No matter the cost. Because for him, justice wasn't an assignment. It was personal.